Hey there everybody, hope everybody is doing okay over there. Hope you also participated in some D&D throughout this month. And I don't mean Dungeons and Dragons, but rather dicks and degenerates. Yeah, in other words, I hope you didn't participate in No Nut November. You need that release. Enough about that though, let's actually get on to the main focus here. Another episode of Loco Profiling that you guys have actually voted for. Yep, we're up to episode 18. London Midland... As I was trying to say, we're up to Loco Profiling episode 18. London, Midland and Scottish, number 5593. Kolhapur. Yes, unfortunately, I forgot to mention the locomotive's name during the actual intro segment. A little bit of post-production for you. Sorry. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Hope you enjoy. Alrighty. First, a little bit of a history lesson on the class, obviously. But, yeah, it's not going to be a small history lesson, sadly. If you remember from a couple of episodes ago, the LMS had 52 Patriot Class 10-wheelers, built between 1930 and 34, numbered 5500 through 5551, designed by Henry Fowler. However, 5 additional Patriot locomotives had been ordered, but by this point in time, Fowler was replaced by William Stanier as Chief Mechanical Engineer of the LMS, and it was either prior to construction or in the early stages of construction that Stanier made the decision to have these additional Patriot locomotives fitted with a tapered boiler, similar to the traits he learned from George Jackson Churchward on the Great Western Railway. Thus, a new class was born, the Jubilees. In all, 191 of them would be built, between 1934 and 36, numbered 5552 through 5742, so they picked up the road numbers where the Patriots left off. Furthermore, the locomotives were built across 3 batches, and each batch was built at a different factory. You had an initial batch of 131 locomotives, built by the LMS themselves at Derby, a second batch of 10 locomotives also built by the LMS themselves, but this time in Crewe, and a final batch of 50 locomotives built by the North British Locomotive Company in Glasgow. Surprisingly, they were only marginally more powerful than the Patriots. They may have had the same 81-inch driving wheels and a 3-cylinder layout, like the Patriots, the Royal Scots, and even Fury, and when compared to the Patriots, they even had a higher boiler pressure of 225 psi. But ultimately, their one downgrade in tractive effort-related geometry was in the form of slightly smaller cylinders, measuring at 17 by 26 inches, which I didn't know at the time that I was making the Fury episode, so humble apologies. The resulting tractive effort was 26,612 pounds, compared to the 26,520 pounds of the Patriots. And yes, the Jubilees were even a tiny bit more powerful than Fury. Let that sink in for a moment. However, the Jubilees were perhaps best known for the somewhat amusing fact that they were Stanier's only major flop. The man was known for excellence, yet these were his only steam locomotives that didn't work properly when they were first introduced. The key problem was poor steaming characteristics, due to an insufficient number of superheater tubes, and mostly due to the blast pipe in the smoke box, which was a little bit too big in diameter. So when the exhausted steam from the cylinders was blasted into the smoke box, the subsequent vacuum wasn't powerful enough to create a good draft. And it took quite some time in order to actually find this problem, largely thanks to the LMS not having the proper testing facilities, ultimately resulting in no fewer than 113 faulty Jubilee locomotives with an oversized blast pipe on the LMS's books. It wouldn't be until 1935 that rectification of these boiler issues were on their way. That year, the first improved Jubilee was built, Locomotive 5665, Lord Rutherford of Nelson, which had a brand new boiler with a better degree of superheating and a slightly smaller diameter on the blast pipe. From that point on, all new Jubilee locomotives that would be built had this improved design from the get-go, and all the older engines were gradually upgraded. At last, they could prove themselves as the new backbone of express passenger trains on the LMS, lasting well into British Railways days. And apart from one that was wrecked in 1952 thanks to the Harold and Wiltstone disaster, the rest would be retired between 1960 and 67. Also, the class became known as Jubilees when on April 29th of 1935, Class Pioneer 5552 had a permanent identity swap with Locomotive 5642, which was named Silver Jubilee. That name was applied in recognition of the titular Silver Jubilee, the 25th anniversary of King George V as the reigning monarch of the United Kingdom. No, not the locomotive, the man that the locomotive was named after, you sodding tic-tacs. Thank you. So, the new 5552 was named Silver Jubilee, while the new 5642 was named Boscawen, fitting in nicely with the list of things that the Jubilee locomotives were named after. Former Commonwealth states and countries of the British Empire, British admirals, British naval commanders, and ships in the British Navy named after characters from Greek mythology. Shame we didn't have an engine named Medusa. Oh well. Now, at long fucking last, we can talk about our subject. Locomotive 5593, Kolhapur. This engine was one of the NBLC engines built in Glasgow, rolling out of their doors in December of 1934. And apparently, on top of the low degree of superheating and the oversized blast pipe, its original boiler didn't have a steam dome to house the regulator valve. So what? GWR practices? Having the valve mounted against the front tube sheet? Answers on a postcard, please. But the engine did get an improved boiler complete with steam dome in April of 1937. And interestingly enough, 5593 was the very locomotive used to haul a very particular train in 1942. That train carried the UK's Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, from Liverpool on his way home from talks with US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. How's that for your World War II history? In BR days, now carrying the extended number 45593, Kolhapur was allocated to various sheds during the 1950s and 60s, including Longsight, Carlisle Upperby, Willesden, Aston, Burton, what the fuck does that say there? Patriecroft, and Newton Heath. Thankfully, 5593 would get a pretty good head start for preservation, when the locomotive was transferred to Leeds Holbeck shed in March of 1965, where the locomotive was kept in good condition for rail tours on the Settle to Carlisle line. The locomotive was also given a yellow warning stripe on the sides of the cab. Silly? Maybe. But that stripe did have a genuine meaning. It was an indication that the locomotive was barred from the electrified West Coast main line south of Crewe. Ultimately, Kolhapur was withdrawn in October of 1967. Then in January of 1968, she was sold to an organization known at the time as the Standard Gauge Steam Trust, best known today by their base of operation, the Birmingham Railway Museum, known today as Tyseley Locomotive Works. During the 1980s, 5593 was rebuilt and repainted back into LMS red, thank goodness, and she became a regular sight on rail tours across the British main line. In 1994, for the 25th anniversary of the Great Central Railway, as a heritage line, the locomotive even masqueraded as Class Pioneer 5552, Silver Jubilee, complete with the right color scheme and livery, a special one-off variant of LMS Black, complete with chrome silver on the steam dome, boiler rings, steam pipes feeding the cylinders, cylinder lining, cab numbering, and tender lettering. Even the smokebox door got silver touches on all the trim, the clock face handle, also known as the smokebox dart, the handrail, the hinge, and the chin straps of the hinge. I'm even willing to bet a symbolic £55 and 52 pence that if they could, they'd even put a chrome silver headlight spire on there. Sadly, this was followed by a short stint in British Railways Brunswick Green, before the engine was withdrawn from service and preservation in 1997, when its boiler certificate expired. Thankfully, she was repainted back into LMS red, but sadly, she's the only one of the 4 preserved Jubilee locomotives to carry that livery today. Meanwhile, sister engines 5596 Bahamas and 5690 Leander had been in LMS red as well in preservation, but now they are preserved in BR numbering. And the youngest surviving Jubilee locomotive, 5699 Galatea, is the most unfortunate engine of the lot in this case, because ever since being secured for preservation, it has never reclaimed its old LMS number, always running in BR numbering, regardless if she's doing so as herself or a fallen classmate. A crying shame, really. Back to 5593, as time went on, the folks at Tysley were discussing the prospect of selling the locomotive to a new owner to make way for the museum's growth plans. But 5593 does seem like it will have another chance in the long run. In May of 2024, David Smith of charter train operator West Coast Railways confirmed that he purchased 5593, and the locomotive would get a further overhaul once it's been moved to Carnforth. Just, please, keep her in LMS red. We don't want another disaster like with both of the preserved Royal Scots running in BR green. Right?